So today at Solus Partners, we're really excited to have Johan of NewMail on. They've got a very innovative AI email solution that provides better data-driven insights to professional organizations, as well as improving just the day-to-day management of email and really just communication at a data and granular level. Johan, could you tell us a little bit about how you guys came up with the idea of NewMail?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Email is like one of these necessary evils. About 4 billion people wake up every day, check their email, and year after year, it's just getting worse and worse. And I tend to imagine that it was like receiving letters. At the start, you'd only receive the highest, most important documents, and it'd be wonderful, and love letters and the like. And every communication was cherished and people spent time on it. And then over time, companies realized it was a really good way to reach people. And so they started doing it at scale, and you started to receive Thai food menus and bills and less and less true communications. Nowadays, maybe you get wedding invites by mail, but most everything else are things that you might have to open just to make sure the IRS is not after you. But it's really nothing to help you grow your business and nothing really valuable to build relationships. So I feel like email has gone down that path every year. It's getting more crowded, more complicated. It's like our mailbox, if our mailboxes were the size of buildings, and it just is getting worse and worse. I think AI is really contributing to this overload. So that's one trend that we noticed. But really, my background is I come from AI, I come from data, I come from data labeling. I started in AI in 2017 at Stanford Research Institute, and we were helping salespeople by giving them real-time recommendations as they were having their sales conversations. So this real-time coaching, training, understanding opportunities for discounts, opportunities to escalate to a manager if need be, this kind of thing. So I've been thinking about how data can be used in personalized product experiences to augment people and help them make better decisions faster and more seamlessly in their existing tools and workflows. What happened was in 2022, December, ChatGPT came out, and I realized, wow, what we attempted to do in 2017, which required millions of dollars of budgets and really complicated server systems, well, now we can do it with an API, and we can really bring it to anybody more easily and cost effectively than ever before. And the starting premise was actually, what is the most personal, professional, specific data that we could use to train a competent AI to augment professionals? It was kind of a general premise. And as we started exploring different potential use cases, we realized that email is a needle in a haystack. But when you get those gems, that's when you get deep insights about what makes a business work and what makes it grow, how to talk about it, what sets it apart, handling objections. And that's where all these interstitial tasks that are really low value but take up a lot of time exist. And so we thought, let's start with email, let's start with scheduling. And that's how the idea started to come together. And a couple of years down the line, we've evolved, as you've said, to focus a lot more on accelerating commercial conversations, identifying leads, prioritizing them, qualifying them, and then, just bringing the right information at the right time for sales and customer-facing roles in general to be able to move deals along and have super fast pipelines and just close a lot more deals and keep their clients a lot happier because they're responding to important things when they should be, and keeping the collaborators happier as well because, you're removing this existential threat of your inbox being filled with 115 pieces of information, 90 of which you don't care about every single day.
I mean, it sounds like you guys have a really dynamic and AI-driven platform when it comes to communication. Can you talk a little bit on the back end? Obviously, there's some serious power behind that dynamic capability.
Yeah. So I mentioned my first experience at Stanford Research Institute. Back then, we were working with the lab that created Siri. So top scientists, this was at, obviously SRI is funded by DARPA, and they invested years and years, millions of dollars into being able to understand and grasp the subtleties of tonality, to understand the energy of the commercial conversation. And in order to do that, they literally had a lab of 20 language science PhDs creating labeled data and building up these capabilities. Over time, this creation of data sets kind of became easier and easier. And in my last startup venture, we created a platform that was called Lodestar. And Lodestar was helping Fortune 500s constitute these data sets for their specific business problems and use computer vision to automate things like you're in a factory, you're producing chips. These chips can have defects. Depending on the type of defect, you probably need to do maintenance on different aspects of your production line. For example, one of the basic ones was soldering. If your soldering machine applied the metal incorrectly, then that's kind of a late stage defect, which is going to cost you a lot. You're going to need to throw out a chip that's got all the work done on it. But if you can identify these problems early on or identify the root cause, you can remove them and make your whole process much more efficient, cost-effective, higher yield. And in some cases, this can represent, in one case, for one type of defect, we improved the production line by 8%. 8% yield, which was massive in that context. So in that company, what we built was cutting edge tools to structure and label data that was very specific to business problems. And I learned that with 100, 200 edge cases, really good images in the right contexts and the right diversity, we could beat systems that had millions of examples because we understood clearly what we're trying to define, what we're trying to identify. Basically, data labeling, and probably some of the listeners have heard of the Scale AI acquisition by Meta. Meta bought 49% of Scale AI for $15 billion. Scale AI was our competitor at Lodestar, but they were focusing on autonomous vehicles. So at first, they built all their systems so that data labelers could very easily sign on to a computer and start clicking away. And I've done this myself for hours to understand their business. We've experienced as CAPTCHAs. Sometimes you've received this grid of 3x3 that says which of these pictures has a car in it, which of these pictures has a traffic light in it. All of that are the millions and billions of examples that were generated to help autonomous vehicles figure out how to drive and how to operate. That is fine, but it's a specific type of problem because billions of people know how to drive, and everybody from the ages 4 and above can recognize a car or a traffic light. But what I mentioned of recognizing defects on a chip, you're talking about a much, much, much smaller, more specialized group of people that have to be trained. And this is the tip of the iceberg. Some problems get much, much more complicated. For example, you can use AI to help identify the size of oil reservoirs by basically mapping the visual patterns to the geological scans. You're talking about hundreds, maybe thousands of people can do that. And so these people, their time is gold, and it's very difficult to get that quality of specific professional data from kind of data labeling farms like Scale AI. So I learned the true importance of having the best structured labeled data. And the core of what we do at NewMail that empowers everything else that we do is the first pass where we go ahead and extract from your inbox all the necessary context to fill in the dots to help you. And then the basics of what we do is draft replies on your behalf, track tasks, prioritize. And so this first pass generation of who you are, who your business is, what your products are, and how you sell them, that's the key. So on the back end, we're going to connect securely, privately with Google or Microsoft. And then we're going to go in, cleverly select high, dense, valuable emails and that you've sent and that you've received, and use them to iteratively kind of create this profile. And we do that with the latest reasoning models that have really big context windows and the ability to basically take knowledge from many sources, evaluate, take some steps of reasoning, and then compile them into the most efficient profile of context. And our expertise is that we do this in 2 minutes. So we're able to show in a quick demo, 30 minutes, go from just meeting someone, discovering their business through conversation, to actually deploying their first AI agent in their inbox that knows them, their business, their product. And then beyond that, it's a matter of just viewing the inbox and the calendar as a human would. So on a daily basis, the AI is going to send you your agenda for the day. And every time that you receive an email, your agent's going to first look at it for you, determine what should happen to it, prioritize it, mark it as read, archive it if it's spam, and if it's important. Is this an ongoing task that we need to be tracking, or is this something we need to respond to? In which case, it's going to do so with your voice, your vocabulary, your style, your way of doing it. And then obviously the goal is to accelerate the commercial conversation. So understanding the pipeline stage and what's the goal at this stage. Is the goal create trust, build a relationship, bring value, pitch, or is it we're further down the pipeline? So now it's time to schedule a meeting. Let's have a call. Let's see how we can help. Boots on the ground and going over into real life.
Well, I mean, admittedly, here at Solus Partners, we subscribe to the same platform and we're loving it so far. So I think you guys are well on your way to providing value for all your customers and clients in that kind of ease of use approach that you have. What kind of groups are you guys engaging with? What has the feedback been so far?
Yeah, so we've engaged pretty broadly in terms of who we give access to the technology. We've not been in the ivory tower of exclusivity. We've wanted to give it out to people and get that feedback of, what use cases it's most valuable for. So we found that a lot of the time we started with small businesses, small teams, startups that don't yet have a very complicated HubSpot, Salesforce kind of CRM in place. And they deal with a lot of their external customers, prospects, partners through their email inbox. And they do so without much structure. And so it becomes this kind of massive, intractable thing that gobbles up a huge amount of their time. I've seen some estimates that roughly 3 hours per person per day is spent on inbox. I think it's definitely depending on segments. Maybe if you take into account that every time you do a context switch, or you even just look at a notification, that it's going to burn about 5 minutes of attention, then I think that does make sense. But so far we've had success with, like I said, consultants who are like independent, providing services. We have some go-to-market consultants. We started working with some lead gen agencies, but also like service providers. We have some accounting firms and other little firms that themselves are externalized and have many customers that they rely on. I know that Slack has become the kind of golden child of Silicon Valley, and it was acquired by Salesforce. But still, I think last estimates I saw, Slack had about 50 million. Is it monthly active users, whereas email, has 20 times that or 80 times that. I think it's 4 billion daily active users of email. That's how companies communicate outside of Silicon Valley. So, small teams. And then I've been telling you about our latest B2B deals. We've been kind of going up market and working with bigger and bigger teams. And it turns out that, even though you might have a CRM, actually getting that visibility as soon as a demand comes in, where is it in the pipeline? How is it being handled? And then helping people to just handle it faster. When you've got a big corporation, there's usually a lot of product documentation, a lot of tools, a lot of different disparate data sources, which means that in a lot of cases, you can't be as responsive as you'd like. And what we see is that incumbents, big companies, sometimes are threatened by smaller, more agile startup players that don't have any process and are just cowboys. And part of it is just their reactivity, their ability to deliver that service where you'll always get someone on the phone. You see what I mean, to get in contact with them. And so we're helping these bigger companies to cut through the process, to get that visibility as soon as something comes in. How valuable is it? How do we respond to it? What data needs to be there to create value for them? And then how do we get on the phone with them, or just to free up kind of that capacity by removing hours of email so they have more time on the phone, they have more time in person, they can build relationships with partners, stakeholders. And so far we're seeing success there. It's still pretty young for us to go up market to here. We're talking about kind of hundreds of salespeople within one organization. I think it's a pretty ubiquitous problem. And we found that the commercial conversation makes more sense for us than support workflows or other workflows. I think support workflows, they're simpler than sales workflows. So they've been targeted by chatbots and this kind of technologies for many more years. And there are a lot of pretty good solutions already in place. But for sales and partnerships, it's still about augmenting the person to be themselves, to just be able to show up as their best self on a daily basis and be fast and knowledgeable and bring value. So I think this is interestingly kind of a blue ocean in some ways to help with this inbound tsunami of demand and interest, and also other out of scope people trying to get in touch. So that's kind of that's how we think about the world, kind of external facing roles, especially sales and partnerships.
That makes a ton of sense. And I think you're right to say that and define it as a blue ocean. Personally, at Soulless Burners, we've not seen a tool that's as dynamic and responsive and personalized as to what NewMail offers. And so obviously you can do it at scale. It's super fast. And just the customization that's automated is really impressive as to how it gets to know you on a personality level, like even going so far into the psychology of the user that you're trying to mirror, I think is really important. Beyond that, when kind of looking at more of the data and the data dashboards, how are groups and organizations finding new insights with NewMail?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we think about insights in kind of two ways. One of them is quantitative and one of them is qualitative. So email is this kind of like unstructured hodgepodge of tons and tons of gigabytes of text. And if you've got a nice CRM setup, you should be able to get response times and things like this to give you hints and insights on how quickly you're able to get into these conversations and move them along. But oftentimes what we find is automating these processes is hard, is heavy, and most companies don't have the talent in-house. So you end up adding process and telling your salespeople, when you send an email, take a note here and let us know what was said and what they did. And at the end of the day, when you have a lot of work, maybe it doesn't get done or it gets done, but it's just not the right level of detail for other people on the team to benefit from it. So on the quantitative side, we're able to extract reactiveness. We're able to extract also to understand not just the average load of emails people get, but what are the peaks? What do the peaks look like? Because I think one of the failings of AI is to try and automate the simple stuff and leave people with the hard things. But really, the simple things are not where we really need help. It's also in the hard scenarios, the hard cases, the Black Friday deals where you've got, a enormous part of your revenue is going to happen in one day and you need to be on top of everything. And that's when you really need the most help. So we kind of map those aspects and we map them recurringly. So you can tell, is your response time improving? What percentage of emails are you actively sending? What are the editing looking like? So you can track the performance of the team and also track the performance of NewMail. So that's on the quantitative side. And then on the qualitative side, we're able to detect signals that we program in natural language. So I think you've experienced it. NewMail can automatically organize email into custom folders. And when it comes to the kind of dashboard side of things, we can do the same kind of subject, like fine-grained data analysis and say, okay, in X many cases, there was a mention of a competitor. In X many cases, we had price objections. And then we can aggregate that data and clean it up and say, this is what people are saying of how you stack up against competitors. Maybe these 15 are positive, these 15 are negative. And then you're getting these price objections on these products and kind of being able to sort that out and pull those insights. Because when you go to a company like this that has 300 booking agents, all in different segments, you just get anecdotal evidence when you ask, what are people saying about our prices? But being able to see everybody's aggregated real quotes from their experience, their exchanges, it's different, and it enables you in these organization settings to have an idea of meritocracy and to say, okay, based on this data, based on X many cases, either this part of what we're doing is great, or this part of what we're doing should be put into question or should be metriced further and further.
That makes a ton of sense. And it's one thing, though, just to experience it firsthand. It's saved us a ton of time and also probably improved some of our responses. Well, we tend to pride ourselves on having it generally a pretty good and professional touch that's curated. I think that your data-driven insight just makes it that much better. So hats off to you guys and just the back-end functionality and effort that's gone into it. Kind of when maybe stepping up to a higher level, what has your guys' experience been like when looking at the adoption of AI email tools and just AI in general across either geographies or industries? Is there a hotspot of industries or geographies that you're seeing a higher adoption, or how does that look in your guys' view?
Yeah, so it's been really interesting being in the AI field since 2017 and seeing the behavior changes. And I think one of the accelerating trends that we're riding now in this post-ChatGPT world is everybody's understood ChatGPT is no longer this massive competitive advantage. It's now table stakes. If you don't have access to these tools that can help you play with language, organize, do these things, you're gonna fall behind. So we've changed from a nice to have to a need to have in the last couple of years, at least from a B2B perspective. What we've noticed in terms of behaviors is very interesting. I lived for 7 years in the US. Now we're based in Switzerland. And so we've got all the security and privacy kind of compliance levels of the highest levels since we're GDPR and we're in Switzerland. I also come from a cybersecurity background, so we've been doing regular penetration testing audits of the highest level provided by kind of Google applications and this kind of thing. But it's been interesting to see that Americans are much more ready to embrace an innovation and find an edge. And I think the risk aversion is different. Whereas in Europe, there's less of an optimistic mentality of growth. And so people are more difficult in terms of their adoption of new technologies. But now the pressure is getting overwhelming, even here in Europe, in terms of, there are things that need to be done. You don't know how AI can apply to your work. You need to find partners, you need to get trained. And so more and more we're seeing huge amounts of, I think consultants have won the first wave of AI in terms of helping people just understand where they're at. But now even consultants, we're having some success with them because they're coming to us and saying, okay, we've done the trainings, but now we need to give people solutions. And for solutions, we need something that's scalable, that's well built out, that's secure and private, and that can deliver clear value on a clear use case. And oftentimes what we see is if you don't have a huge company, if you don't have a lot of software people, data is usually difficult to aggregate, disparate, and it's all over the place. And so if you want to make something be adopted by a lot of teams, but you don't have like an AI champion per team that's going to do the data collection, cleaning, structuring, then you need a tool that's capable of doing that automated context extraction. So I think we have a real leg up here. And part of our thinking is we focus on these high ROI commercial conversations first, but eventually we're going to land and expand, and augmenting your entire team will make sense from that perspective. And I think we're going to keep digging deeper and bringing more value to commercial conversations. But definitely there's a common core of what we do that can kind of apply across the enterprise.
That makes a ton of sense. And I guess when you think about geographies, and obviously could be a push, and you've already mentioned it, of pushing into more of those enterprise level sales conversations. Having been in startups, you only have so many hours of the day with a limited team. Where do you see the focus? Is it kind of split between Europe and the US right now? Is it US heavy? Is it Europe heavy? How do you think about that as a founder, and how would you recommend founders focusing on when trying to plan out their sales funnel? How do you like to approach that?
So we kind of have a dual strategy here, which is we had some early design partners that were French speaking because I happen to come from a family of entrepreneurs. We have different businesses and we're Swiss and French based. And so from the start, we made our application fully translated into French and English. We are attacking the US market because we know that that's kind of where the most conversions and the most demand for this kind of tool currently is. But at the same time, we're also distributing a lot and talking to a lot of companies here in Switzerland and France, because I think as a founder, you kind of have to rely on your network at first to start to grow your visibility. And having lived in both ecosystems, I think, of course, it makes perfect sense. A lot of startups will say, scale in America first, sell in America first. It's more competitive, but there is a more uniform mentality around getting a technological edge. And I'm seeing it also in top performing European companies. People have taken a lot from the American playbook. So I would say get feedback close to home if you're outside of the US, but also do consider that if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere.
I think a lot of founders are going to appreciate that perspective. And I personally seen that work for a number of different groups when playing more from the investor side of the table. And so it would only further underline the points you just made there. When it comes to your team, obviously you guys have a pretty deep insight into data and data modeling. What has been your experience like when finding those highly qualified individuals to bring onto your team at NewMail? How do you go about that? What's it like managing that?
Yeah, so I always think it's fascinating how Silicon Valley, Y Combinator, they kind of love the dropout or the college graduate founder, because I feel like at that stage of my career, I didn't have the network necessary to find those exceptional talents around me. Maybe it's because I didn't go to MIT. I went to NYU and Carnegie Mellon. So there was still a lot of talent around me. But just, through past startup experiences and also living in startup hubs, I lived 5 years in New York and then 2.5 years in Silicon Valley. I did 3 AI startups. I think it's important to immerse yourself in the culture and meet the people. And then I think I'd rather work with someone in network or once removed, but from someone I trust as a really, really strong kind of leader to vet someone else rather than any number of logos. I'd much rather work with people I have worked with or people that I have strong allies that have worked with them because CVs are gameable. And especially in the startup game, you don't need somebody that can pass the exam. You need somebody that can put in the work and be there when it's hard and pull through and not let the stress and ambiguity get to them. Because obviously, today we're talking about the bright sides of what works after years of work and experimentation. But startups are difficult and it takes a special kind of resilience to be a good talent for startups. Part of that is just a very high autonomy and agency, being able to get a high level goal and just go after it and fail many times and keep going until you find something that really works. So it's not for the faint of heart. I also think it's not incredibly difficult to do the startup thing. I think it's also kind of glamorized. I'm sure that being a specialist in any number of organization, you have to do very, very difficult work where you come under different kinds of stress. But in startups, it's mostly about being able to switch context, being able to be very low ego. And I think this low ego thing, entrepreneurship is a constant lesson of humility. You are going to fail 10 times because if you don't recognize that, you're just drinking the Kool-Aid and convincing yourself that you're not failing and you're not failing fast enough and you're going to go down the wrong rabbit holes. So it's more like traditional machine learning was called gradient descent. You have to try to go in every direction and find what works. But you can't just chart one path. You have to move a little bit, baby steps, and then reassess and reassess and reassess and not fall into analysis paralysis, but just figure out, okay, experimentation mindset, student mindset. How do we learn from here to get to a better place?
I think that's really helpful perspective and advice. And then I think kind of just segueing on to a similar theme, how would you describe NewMail's team culture? Probably pretty autonomous in terms of everyone that's there. And then what would be the advice or perspective you would have for founders when trying to cultivate a highly effective team culture?
Yeah. So something I really fundamentally believe in, hire people that are better, stronger, smarter than you and give them full ownership. And your role as a founder is just to hammer in what's the vision, what's the mission, what's the market saying, what are the challenges, unknowns we're trying to demystify, and what is most likely to change our business if it changes tomorrow. And if you give that aspect of the why to your teams and find strong people that you can rely on and empower them, trust them, give them ownership, they will do great work. They will do great work. I always lead from a place of nobody gets into this sort of adventure if they don't want to win. So if we can establish that trust that, okay, we're both here to do great work and to win, as long as what it takes to win is clear and frequently clarified as we iterate and change and transform, we're going to get there. And I think sometimes there is also a kind of obstination or obsession with aligning, and syncing every morning and understanding every little bit of the path. I think it's important to have regular opportunities to sync, especially on when you need to coordinate more complex things. But really, you're going to converge if you have this clear strategy, this clear vision, this clear mission. You're gonna keep going towards it. And I think every single time that I've thought to myself that something was not going right because somebody was not putting in the right effort, every time I double clicked and I went into it with an open mind and empathy and said, please explain to me why you chose to do it this way. Every time they've said, well, I originally thought this, and then I tested it and it didn't work. So I looked at the next best 3 areas we could go. And, you'll always be surprised. And one thing that I remember from one of my first internships, I was working in this venture capital firm, and the general partner was so intent on me doing everything exactly the way that he would do them that I could never be myself. And I told him, you are not giving me the space to impress you and exceed your expectations. You want me to match your expectations so closely, I could never exceed them. So give me more space or you're going to be disappointed.
That is, unfortunately, I think a very common point of challenge across the VC space when it comes to just human relationships and managing up and through the hierarchy. So I think it's hats off to you for having that direct feedback. Oftentimes that's not a two-way street. When it comes to, I guess, as you alluded to, the mission and vision of NewMail, where do you see the direction of the company going over the next 3 to 5 years? Kind of what would be like the dream state, say, in 5 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think in the start of the adventure, we focused very much on making competent agents that anybody could deploy that would be relevant in their competent and relevant because of that context. When I push it out a little bit further, I kind of think of ourselves as this infrastructure that any company can adopt to hire these digital employees that are not mercenaries, but missionaries that don't just understand what you're doing, but understand why you're doing it and how. Because I think we're all going to have digital employees. And the difference today between people who write emails in their ChatGPT that has no context or emails in a ChatGPT that has all their context, or let NewMail write their emails with 25 times more context and a much more seamless UX. Currently, it's a matter of minutes and percentage response time, things like this. Currently, it's not truly groundbreaking yet. I think it's an edge and it's an advantage, especially in cases where there's a high volume. So we have some people that receive 300 emails a day, have to respond to 70, 100 emails a day. In those cases, if we save them 3-4 minutes times 100, we're saving them truly hours in a day. I think over time, as we deploy more and more agents to handle other aspects, maybe in customer service, maybe voice agents, kind of like finance processes or whatever, I think this ability to structure, label, draft the most perfect packets of context and then hand them off appropriately to the right roles and responsibilities will mean that you can either hire a mercenary, like sometimes we use Upwork or Fiverr, or, we just need somebody's expertise to weigh in on something. We're going to prepare all the data. We're going to show them exactly where we need them. And then that's going to work. But that's going to take 3 people and to do it right, or we'll do it incorrectly and it'll potentially be a disaster. I think it's going to stay like that. NewMail will be the solution for companies that have a strong vision, strong brand values, and want the benefit of the AI revolution.
That makes a ton of sense. And I think, as you kind of alluded to, as people get more comfortable with ChatGPT and kind of the base layer of these LLMs, they're going to be looking for even a further edge that obviously then presents a really nice path into NewMail. Beyond that, a kind of adoption curve, what have been kind of the roadblocks or the common challenges you as a team have seen so far?
Yeah, so it's always interesting. There's a sentence that says, plan and the gods laugh. There's like devils in the detail. I remember when we first started picking apart the email problem, one of the people on the team who is no longer on the team said, I'm not really interested in this because I think email is too small a problem. I think we found that it's actually quite the opposite. And there's a reason that it's still terrible, even though I think Google's Gmail came out almost 20 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And Google's managed to solve some pretty interesting planet scale challenges. But really, truly being able to understand how companies build relationships and grow, it's presented a lot of challenges. Like, just to give you some ideas. Well, the first thing that really took us a lot of time was the privacy, security, compliance aspects. We decided before we went to market with some like really bolted together, scrappy solutions at first. And we got a lot of demand and we understood what it would take to be able to scale the onboarding. The first product that we put out, it would take me manually hours to onboard people. I'd be manually writing XML files and having them upload filters into their Gmail rules. It was a whole gambit. And since then, to get down to this 2-minute onboarding like you've seen, kind of collapsing that down has been a tremendous challenge. So there's been the infrastructure pieces, compliance, security, privacy, making sure that you can plug it in, you get all the benefits of the AI. Nobody else has any access to it, and not even the AI providers. That was a very large challenge. Then we found that email itself, there's a lot of tiny details between billion different clients, but I'm gonna skip over that. That's not that interesting, but it's the sort of thing I remember every time I would learn a little nugget of insight about how different clients handle things differently, from Gmail to Apple to all these things. I thought this is the unsexy information that will help build into our moat, and that you can't just find on the internet or even in ChatGPT. But beyond that, I would say we found that although people realize AI is important, I need it in my workflows. When we started, before we started to automatically extract context in a couple minutes, we would ask people what we thought were pointed questions, like, tell us your name, tell us the name of your role, tell us some of your key responsibilities. We found that people would instantly try to imagine the next step of how these blocks would fit into a prompt, and they would just kind of psych themselves out and just say, I don't know what this is like. So then we introduced templates, and we said, okay, what kind of role do you have? And we found almost 90% of people, even though we try to create the right buckets, didn't really identify with the buckets, because we were working at first with founders, consultants, independents, people who handle a lot of things, have different roles. They felt like none of the personas fully captured them. And so that's what pushed us all the way to, well, we're gonna let the AI figure this out. And this was a technical challenge we weren't sure we were going to truly overcome. We ended up building our own kind of prompt development and evaluation suite of tools. So that was a lot, because at the time when we started, nothing was mature. And it was kind of like a free-for-all, LangGraph and LangChain and LangSmith and all these kind of LLM tools were popping up, but they were badly documented. You were introducing a layer of dependency on another super young startup. And we didn't really have full confidence in any of them. We wanted to own our stack. So we ended up building those tools. And now today we've got a really strong, robust process for ingesting data, for testing prompts, for improving on prompts, for extracting context. So all that took a long time in order to get to that experience where in 2 minutes you go from your, sea of emails that's overwhelming to something a lot more structured, organized, prioritized, with responses drafted, tasks tracked, and you can hit the ground running. And all you need to do is subscribe, and then the next day it'll be the same. And you'll have an agent that is there, knows you, your product, your company, and just keeps getting better at helping.
I mean, that's really fascinating evolution, and the fact that you guys were able to go through those, I guess, points of challenge on the tech stack to get to where you're at today sounds really cool in terms of a story, but I can only imagine the difficulties and the late nights that were involved in that. One second, I'm going to record that or re-say that again, just drop the headphone. So no worries there. Well, in terms of that evolution, that's very fascinating insight. Really appreciate you guys sticking through that, because it's obvious that there's going to be some late nights involved in the meetings with the development team, as well as just the future vision mapping in those meetings. Kind of from a founder perspective, how are you getting the word out from a marketing standpoint?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we've tried many different axes. I'm hearing this, find the one that works the best and stick with it. So far, we've kind of benchmarked what other fast-growing AI startups have done and try to see what works best for us. So we've invested in SEO to drive organic traffic, to have a more present position on the subjects that we feel we're becoming an authority on. We've done some kind of like founder marketing on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is an interesting place because it's a place for building relationships. So it's a place where B2B salespeople do go, but it's got its drawbacks. I'm really interested in how LinkedIn will fit in the picture of what we build, relationship building as we keep going, because a lot of outbound is happening on LinkedIn. We've done also conferences. We've done a lot of trainings for corporates. I've been speaking on a lot of these topics, kind of doing all the opportunities that we have, trying to have a growth mindset and an experiment. I think so far, because we have a pretty low ACV in terms of like directly catching people and a pretty high bar on working with bigger groups, it's been a lot of in-person relationship building through events, trainings, networks, conferences for the B2B side of things. And then on B2C side of things, it's been ads, SEO, LinkedIn, and kind of we did newsletters and waitlists and things. I think if I can talk about one go-to-market exercise, which worked less well than I thought, we invested in this fancy waitlisting tool back in the day before we launched. And we got about 100 people on there just showing interest super early on in this project. They knew exactly where we were at and they're excited about it. Turns out that 2/3 of the features on this fancy waitlist were just kind of irrelevant for us. It was all about social sharing and things like this. But at the time, we were just not dedicating enough effort to understand how to make kind of a viral waitlist. So we invested there, even though it didn't bring us much. And then of these 100 people, I think we had very low conversion rate. So a lot of window shoppers, but it's fascinating to get these insights of what works and what doesn't work. Where do you introduce friction? Where do you make it easy? How to make things shareable? Product-led growth is something we're trying to invest more into. Like for those who are not very familiar, Calendly, great example of this. I'll send you my Calendly. It's Calendly/Johan. And when you click on it, you'll be able to schedule. And that means that me using Calendly means giving you Calendly to use. That means that every time a user is using the product, somebody else is seeing it. We're trying to build something similar to that into this experience. And the way we're thinking about it right now is when we do this context extraction, we generate a profile recap. We actually want to generate also some of the analytics that I mentioned that we do for B2B in terms of how many emails you're sending, receiving, peak load, things like this. And also some qualitative around what kind of salesperson you are, how tenacious, and kind of nicely format this profile to make it a social trigger so that people can share their pitch, share their profile, compare with friends and others, compare within their team, kind of grow from there. And then another thing that we have in mind is kind of enriching your address book from your emails by kind of summarizing every interaction, how it's gone so far. Like Gemini and Outlook, they'll make a little summary per thread so you can quickly get a gist of the thread. But we want to make summaries per account and then share that across teams. So you're encouraged to, if you add all your team members, you're going to get access to these summaries for each account that anybody in your team has talked to and get that real level of detail. So if Jim's not there and somebody's reaching out to him and you have to pick it up, well, you can see exactly the last 2 events that Jim participated in with them, what they talked about, and you can pick it up in a way that is just fluid, seamless, super professional, keep building and growing, and just give the customer or the partner the best experience. I think that would be a way to help us kind of lend and expand into teams. I think that's kind of the future for us if we can find the right ways to do that. One of the ways that we do it today is inspired by Sent from My iPhone, but we've changed it into Prioritized by NewMail. The idea is we want to empower everybody to be super on top of what's really important. And when you send a really important email and you get an answer back within minutes and you'll see Prioritized by NewMail, you're going to think to yourself, that's an advantage. And I want my key people to be as on top of it as this person was. That's one of the things we're working on. But we're finding some of the groups that we're working with, they understand that they should be using AI, and it is a socially can be a positive, especially if they do their job and actually make sure the email is nice. But we've heard from a couple of people, we don't want our competitors to find out about you because you're our special edge. So there's a trade-off to navigate there.
Well, I think like all edges, you kind of have to build out a moat. Obviously, you guys have it, but you will be the Walmart supercenter of email here soon enough, if you're not already. So the Walton track record, I think, in terms of better products for great people, I think is well aligned there, at least when it comes to your guys' approach, and especially the focus on just product-led growth. I think that makes a ton of sense. And so kind of just wrapping up here, I know, Johan, you mentioned Johan.Calendly as one way to get in touch with you. What is the most preferred or best way to get in touch with you or your team members when people are looking to learn more or potentially just subscribe?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Why at NewMail.ai That's my direct line of communication. If you want to reach out to me there, I'll be super responsive, obviously. Otherwise, on LinkedIn, Johan Abitan. My name is right here. That's also a good way to reach me. That's where we share. We believe in building public and just trying to create value for people in our space that are interested in how to use AI in their business to grow better, faster, stronger. I think those are the two best ways.
Excellent. Well, Johan, I really appreciate your insight today and your approach to NewMail and just giving us a little bit more context to how you and your team are growing this out. It's very exciting to hear about.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Super thoughtful questions, and I hope my responses will be interesting, entertaining, and maybe educating to some of your listeners. It's been a great pleasure here as well, and we appreciate your support.
Yeah, fantastic content. So we're very encouraged by today's conversation. Thank you.
Stay in touch. Thank you, Stephen.
Absolutely.